This is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, wonderful to have you along. The past number of episodes, we've been asking people to come and help and sponsor episodes, and Baruch Hashem, we have gotten a response. But of course, more people are definitely welcome to come. And if you, I don't know where you're watching this, but don't forget to like, subscribe, and forward, or something like that, whatever it is. Whatever, you know this. If you know what it means, you know what it means. So our sponsorship today is sponsored by Gavin. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Enoch. I mean, this is the way you usually spell Chanoch in English. So I don't know if this is Chanoch or it's Enoch, or it's enough. Love the show. You offer a rare combination of entertainment and depth that is just a pleasure to listen to. Please keep the shows coming. Well, Baruch Hashem, thanks to people like you, that is possible to be able to keep this going. And what can I tell you? It is definitely, I have been asked a number of times over the years to open a seminary. And whenever I would be asked that, I would say, why? What niche is not being filled that you want me to come along and fill? And they were like, no, just like to make money. I was like, no, I'm not going to do something just if everybody else is doing it. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. There are so many organizations that duplicate the efforts of similar organizations, and it's hard for them to explain why their organization is essential more than anything else. When I was running NCSY in Long Island, there were these different yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael that catered to Americans who were coming to Israel for a year or 2 years. And they wanted me to send them my better NCSYers who were graduating and thinking of coming to Israel. And whenever a new yeshiva would come, I would say, why is your yeshiva different than any place else? What's unique about it? You know? And they would try. It was hard to give an explanation. I remember when I eventually made Aliyah and I was working for Dovid. So I would go sometimes to school to have an Israel night, and they would have all the yeshivas were lined up, and they all had 5 minutes to give their pitch, you know. And everybody basically said the same thing, you know, in 5 minutes. What was the difference? And that's why I remember when I was asked to make a recording for my son's yeshiva, Chachma Yerushalayim, I said, it's not another yeshiva, it's a different yeshiva. And that's what you have to ask yourself, why this is here. Now, sometimes, like in Europe, why did you go to a yeshiva? You went because you wanted to learn from a particular yeshiva. It was very interesting when Rabbi Liff, Shira Liff, who was just starting then Ner Yaakov, he came to meet with me, and I said, why is your yeshiva different than this one or that one? He goes, because of me. I bring a unique perspective to it. Okay. So that's understandable. Understandable to say that the person themselves is unique. But when I started this podcast, there were a number of considerations I had. And one of them was to do something that I did not believe was being done, which was to provide Torah in an entertaining way. And that's why early on I changed it, you know, to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, because we do different kind of things. You know, I got some positive feedback. Baruch Hashem, I didn't get any negative feedback. But we dedicated our Hallel show on the proper way to make a barbecue, which the Torah content of which is questionable, bordering on non-existent, except, of course, that Torah affects every aspect of our lives. And so, you know, but that's something that I think is interesting, you know, and I believe people need to be people who are curious. During this period of time of Suras HaOmer, there is a the Bali Musa bring down that you should be learning the Memches Dvarim Shator Nignat Behen, which is a brisa in the 6th parak of Pirkei Avos. I stress Pirkei Avos and not Maseches Avos. Maseches Avos has only 5 prakim. Pirkei Avos is called Pirkei Avos. It added in a 6th parak called Kinyonei HaTorah, which is there specifically for this time of year to be able to have a 6th week that we have Mishnayos to learn. Brises to me that we'll learn, I should say. And one of those brises is the 48 things you need to be Kohen Torah. And the first one is Talmud, which means to be a person of learning. You need to be curious. The way you get Torah, the first thing you need is you have to be a person who is going to be interested. Moshe Rabbeinu is taking care of his sheep, and he sees a bush that is on fire and it is not being consumed. And he says, well, now there's something you don't see every day. And he walked to investigate. And the pasuk says, and when Hashem saw that Moshe was walking over to see it, he spoke to him. First, you have to be curious. You have to be a person who's interesting. Reb Chaim Brisker came into the Beis Medrash once, and he says to the boys, there's a train that leaves Brisk for, I think it was Vilna, every hour on the hour. And there's a train that leaves Vilna for Brisk every hour on the hour. And they run 24 hours a day. So if you take a train from Brisk to Vilna, how many trains will you pass going in the opposite direction? It wasn't a Tosfos. It was to teach people how to think, just to be curious, to be interesting. One of the reasons I do this is to present Torah in a way that will be interesting and engaging. And as I've mentioned, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who say, really, there's nobody who does what you do. And that's why when I started the podcast, that was one of my motivations, to do something that nobody else was doing and to be able to present Torah. You can go on to Torah anytime. There are I think 10 million hours of shiurim on Torah anytime. And you can, plenty of shiurim. But I think that what we do here is something unique. And so thank you so much for that sponsorship. And as I mentioned, it's only people like you who make this possible. Okay, those of you who are listening along with us, you might hear some noise in the background, and that's because even though it is May and it is Iyar, and even Rabbi Meir holds that if it rains after Pesach, it's not a Siman Klala, but after Nisan it is. Baruch Hashem, it's still Nisan. Did I say it was Iyar? Yeah. Let's try again. Those of you listening at home, you might hear some noise in the background. And all I can say is I hope that we pass like Rabbi Meir. It is so ironic. I was teaching Mishnayos one of the first years I came here, and I was taking a bus to the yeshiva where I was teaching. And a guy sitting next to me looks over and sees I'm doing Mishnayos Tainus. And he says, I just hope we passing like Rabbi Meir. And it seems so random. And then I realized the Mishnah says, if it rains after Pesach, it's a Siman Klala. Rabbi Meir says it's not a Siman Klala if it's still Nisan. So we still have a few days left to Nisan. And we are having a downpour here in Yerushalayim. I mean, this is May. This is unusual to have this kind of a storm. But it's pouring, absolutely pouring. So that might be the noise that you hear in the background. If you actually start to hear claps of thunder, that's because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is not happy with what I'm saying, in which case I will have to beat a hasty retreat, as they say. In any event, there was a period of time, I know, when there was this work that was very popular. It was called Sefer HaTodah. And it was on the Moedim, it was on the different holidays, and it brought together halacha and hashkafa. And I remember when I went to school, we used that as a text. It was definitely a very thorough work. And And after Pesach, the section that he deals with, before he gets to Pesach Sheni, before he gets to Lag BaOmer, but obviously before Shavuos, he deals with what he calls the modern holidays. And there are three, what he includes as modern holidays. And he attempts to be as even-handed as he can and present both sides of the issues. And that is, of course, the first one is Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. The second one is Yom HaZikaron, which is Memorial Day for Israeli soldiers. And the last is Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. I guess you could also include in this set Yom Yerushalayim, 1967, when the old city of Yerushalayim was liberated and we had access once again to the Western Wall to be able to go and daven. So he points out that these holidays are controversial. And the emotional impact of these days are tremendous. I was speaking in Or LaGolah, which is a rabbinical training program. And I was discussing the issue of Yom HaAtzmaut. And I said, look, there are obviously different views about it. Here I was speaking specifically about the idea of saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. Some people say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. Some people say it with a bracha. Some people say it without a bracha. Some people don't say it at all. There are people in Mei Yesharim who actually fast on Yom HaAtzmaut and say the slichos and do the laning that is associated with the fast day. So that's more or less and then some people do nothing. Yeah. So that's more or less the gamut of responses. So I was discussing this. I was doing a series of how to answer basic questions. And I said, look, it's a halachic issue. When people ask me, do you say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut? I say to them, do you eat gebrachs? And regardless of what they say, if they say, I do eat gebrachs, I don't eat gebrachs, I say, why? I eat gebrachs, or I don't eat gebrachs. Why do you do that? I said, I'm following my custom. I said, I'm also following my custom. All right. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rebbe Yoshev, Rashach, basically all the contemporary poskim say not to say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. That's their position. Anyway, I mentioned in the course of this that Rav Soloveitchik, who I can't call him the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University, because Norman Lamb, when Rav Soloveitchik passed away, he said he was never the Rosh Yeshiva. I'm the Rosh Yeshiva. He was, the only position he ever held was visiting professor of Talmud. So I don't want to call him the Rosh Yeshiva and get into any trouble. But he, of course, was seen as the Torah giant in Yeshiva University. I said, he did not say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. So there was a fellow in the program who was a Musmach from YU, and he said to me, that's a lie, and you know it. I was kind of surprised. I mean, I'm teaching a class, and the fellow's calling me a liar, like an intentional liar to my face. Pretty dramatic. So I said, my father-in-law, who has smicha from the Rav, by the way, this fellow had never been in shir with the Rav, says, my father-in-law who got smicha from the Rav said he didn't say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. He says, it's a lie. I said, my friend Rabbi Orlofsky, who has smicha from Yeshiva University, he said he was in a minyan with the Rav and he didn't say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. He said, it's a lie. Now, I had a stroke of luck because Rabbi Lazarus had just taken over Orla Gola, and he had smicha from YU. And he stands up. He was just sitting in to observe the classes. And he goes, I was in a minyan with the Rav in YU, and he didn't say Hallel. Now, this is the guy's boss. I said, is he lying also? He said, all of his closest Talmidim, Rabbi Rekefet and Hershel Shechter, they all said that he said Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. Now, I didn't know whether that was true or not. I later went home and I looked up the Sefer of Hershel Shechter wrote about Rav Soloveitchik, wherein he says that Rav Soloveitchik said in a shir that if you say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut, you're a Macharif and a Megadev, a blasphemer and a denier of Torah. So that's not the same thing as saying you should say it. But I didn't have that in front of me at the time, Anyway, after the class, I pulled him aside and I said, I don't think it's appropriate to call someone who's teaching a class a deliberate liar. Well, even if you want to say I'm wrong, I wasn't a deliberate liar. I'm reporting what I heard. You may have heard something different. I said, I remember hearing that Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky held that the Yemenite pronunciation is the most correct pronunciation because they have the most sounds. So, for example, if you do Sfaradi, there's no difference between a patach and a kametz. They do both of them as a patach. There's no or sound. We do the Temani have a patach and a kametz. We have a tuf and a suf in Ashkenazic pronunciation. Sephardim only have a tuf. On the other hand, Ashkenazim pronounce a chaf and a ches the same way, whereas Sephardim pronounce the chaf the way Ashkenazim do, and a ches is more guttural. They do the same thing. We do an aleph and an ayin the same way, and Sephardim do an ayin also guttural. Shema, yeah. So they have all those sounds and more. So they don't have a suf. They don't do everything as a tuf the way the Sephardim do, but they don't do a suf because that's the same thing as a samach. So therefore they have a suf and a thuf, th, Shabbath. They have a gimel and a gimel. They have a dalid and a zalid, dzid, yeah. Which is closer to like a J sound. So they have the most sounds. They have a vav and a wav, yeah. So so he used to say, I heard that he used to say Kriya Shema over with the Temani pronunciation. I said, now let's say there was a Talmud from Yaakov here. He might have said to me, yeah, I don't know where that rumor got started from. I was with Rabbi Yaakov. He never did such a thing, etc. But I don't think he would call me a liar. And this rabbi looks at me and he says, saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut is more important than saying Kriya Shema twice a day. And I said, surely you don't mean that, because saying Kriya Shema is a d'oraisa, and Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut is at best a d'Rabbanan. It's at best a d'Rabbanan. And he said again, saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut is more important than saying Kriya Shema twice a day. I said, you understand Kriya Shema is a fundamental declaration of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's yichud, the oneness of Hashem, and that nothing else exists. People went to their death saying Shema Yisrael. Surely you're not comparing the two. And he said for a third time, saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut is more important than saying Kriya Shema twice a day. So that's an emotional reaction. There's no question about it. It doesn't make any sense. It's emotional. When I was teaching in yeshiva, so this young man said to me, I'm going to say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut with a bracha. And I said, really, why? So I met this guy, and he says to me, are you going to say Hallel, the bracha on Yom HaAtzmaut? He goes, I don't know. And he gave me all of his reasons and arguments, and it made a lot of sense to me, and that's what I'm going to do. I said, what happens if it turns out that there's a shaila in your family and you might be a mamzer? Who would you ask that question to? He did a double take. So, I guess I'd go to Scheinberg. I said, why don't you just meet somebody in the street and ask him, do you think I'm a mamzer? And let him tell you whether he does or not. He says, because it's important. I said, then if this is a halachic issue, and it is a halachic issue, then it's also important. I remember reading an article in the Jerusalem Post many years ago. Rabbi Riskin had a column there. And he said, the question is not, according to halacha, whether you should say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut or not. The question is, how could something as important as the founding of the state of Israel take place and you not say Hallel? Someone showed me the column at the time and said, what do you say to that? I said, saying Hallel is a halachic issue. If the halach is you say it, you say it. If the halach is you don't say it, you don't say it. It's not decided that emotionally, I'm very excited about something and I feel very strong. I don't say Hallel. You don't do that. And that's what Rav Soloveitchik meant when he said, because the Gemara says, if you say Hallel b'chol yom, you're mechayef and megadef, that's what he was basing himself on. If there's no halachic impetus to say Hallel, you're not allowed to say Hallel. There was a back and forth between Rabbi Yosef Blau, the mashgiach of YU, and Rabbi Meiselman, who was a nephew of Soloveitchik and learned with him for many years, about saying Hallel. And Rabbi Meiselman, stating the Rab's position, said that he did not say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. So Rabbi Blau, they were going back and forth in Tradition, which was the journal of the Rabbinical Council of America. And there was like a rejoinder to the rejoinder. They went back and forth, So he says, everybody knows that Soloveitchik allowed in the Maimonides school in Boston for them to say Hallel without a bracha at the end of davening. To which Rabbi Meiselman wrote back and said, surely, Rabbi Blau, you know that saying Hallel at the end of davening without a bracha has no halachic significance whatsoever. So that's just a feel-good thing to make people happy. But that's not called Hallel. So this was, the emotions run so high when it comes to this. And it's sort of a bellwether. So let me go into the slippery slope over here. There is a position, and the position is that the founding of the state of Israel demands changes in my religious observance. The fact that the Jews were able to reestablish a Jewish state under Jewish rule in the land of Israel after almost 2,000 years is something that is an open miracle and needs to be celebrated as such. The very fact that we were able to declare this state, that in itself is a miracle, and it demands a religious response, saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut and certain other things that go along with that. That's one approach. The other approach, which is the extreme approach I mentioned, of some people in Mei Yesharim, hold that it is a Maisa Satan. It's an act of the devil. It is forbidden to have anything to do with this state, which is evil, and we pray for its downfall and its destruction. And that's why they fast and they, you know, and all the things that they do that are associated with that, because they also feel that the founding of the State of Israel demands a religious response. So those are the two extremes. In between, there's levels of response. Rav Mendel Weinbach, the Rosh Yeshiva of Or Sameach, told me when he was in Ponevezh in 1948, and they read the Declaration of Independence, he says the Bachrim in Ponevezh were dancing in the streets. He said the Rebbeim didn't, but the Bachrim were dancing. People saw in this as the framework for being able to establish a Jewish state with Judaism. A Jewish state, not a secular state of Jews, but a Jewish state. And that's what they really believed. They believed that this was going to be the beginning. They suddenly saw Jews from all over the world after the Holocaust being brought to Israel. And in Sefer Todah, he writes, when they came to the bracha, you know, Tekah b'shofar gadol, cherosenu, kabetz nedachenu me'abak kavos haaretz, people were crying. He says, we're watching the ingathering of the exiles before our very eyes. These are miraculous times taking place. And it was something that was unbelievable. Yeah. So they see it as an absolute miracle and something. The Satmar Rebbe, who opposed it, bases himself on a Gemara in Ksuvos that says when we went into exile, we swore 3 vows that we would not return to the land of Israel without permission from the nations of the world. And so the fact that we came in by force of arms and established the state of Israel, now that goes against those 3 shvuos, and therefore we're not allowed to be here. Not as an independent country. The Jews have always lived here, even during the darkest times of the land of Israel, but not to be able to make our own country. The Meshech Chochmah, interestingly enough, says that when the League of Nations voted to allow the Jews to establish a homeland in Palestine, that was the fulfillment of the Shvuah that the nations of the world gave us permission to come back. And many people also feel that the UN partition vote in 1947, which said we're giving this land to the Jewish people, also served that purpose of giving us permission to be able to come back to the land of Israel. But the people who object to it on a different grounds. And I heard Rabbi Bullman speak one year on Yom HaAtzmaut in Or Sameach, very emotionally, as he often did. And he said, the saddest part about Yom HaAtzmaut is that we wish we could celebrate it. It's heartbreaking to us that we can't. So what's going on? So the Brisker Rav, I think, summed up the opposition, not as stark perhaps as the Satmar Rebbe, but he said it as follows. He said, you think that they wanted to build a Jewish state, and in the process they had to destroy Judaism. He said, it's not true. They wanted to destroy Judaism, and they figured that building a Jewish state was the best way to do it. Now, if you read the writings of Theodor Herzl, when he saw the terrible problem of anti-Semitism, he saw it in a number of places, but the Dreyfus trial really pushed him over the top. His first solution was that all of the Jews should intermarry and assimilate, and then there wouldn't be any more Jews, and so there wouldn't be any anti-Semitism. When he saw the Jews wouldn't do it, his backup plan was to make a Jewish state where we would be a nation like all the other nations, to be able to do whatever we wanted. And this way, it would be a cosmopolitan place. That's how Tel Aviv was originally envisioned. In the original charter of Tel Aviv, it said there are not allowed to be any synagogues built in this city. Likewise, Beit HaKerem, when it was founded in Yerushalayim, had a similar clause, no synagogues. And they did not want Judaism to be a part of this state. And the state would serve as a means of normalization so that the Jews would be able to be a nation among all the other nations, unburdened by religion. And that's why when the Declaration of Independence was written in the United States, they included God. Now, it's very interesting because freedom of religion was built into the Bill of Rights, that everybody can choose to follow whatever religion they want or none at all. There'll be no obligation on religious observance. And yet they put God's name into the Declaration of Independence. Many of them were either people who followed religion or were deists, people who believed in God. And certainly that was inherent in the founding of America. When they were writing the Declaration of Independence, the secular Zionists who were in charge refused to put God's name into it. And the religious Zionists who were there fought with them, and they finally came with a compromise where they wrote Sur Yisrael, the Rock of Israel. So anybody who wanted to think it talked about God was talking about God, and anyone who didn't could say it didn't. But they wouldn't even put God's name in the Declaration of Independence, which was problematic. It was problematic. Right? The religious people looked at this and said, they won't even mention God's name? But still, hopes were high. Hopes were high. The story of the assimilation of Sephardic Jewry is a black chapter in Israeli history. It has been documented, wherein Sephardic Jews who were all religious came across, and the children were put on irreligious kibbutzim. They cut off their payas, they took away their tefillin, and if they were caught davening, they were beaten. Part of the idea of universal conscription in the army was once we have you under our control, we can force you to give up your religious beliefs. And there are many stories of this taking place. There have been situations throughout. So there's a tension because Ben-Gurion would, show people Meir Sharm, and he says, one day this will be a museum of what Jews used to be. But we'll free ourselves from that. When I was in high school, Ariel Sharon was speaking. And it was after the Yom Kippur War. And he kept saying, Ani lo dati aval. Ani lo dati aval. I'm not religious, but, I have a warm place for this. So a friend of mine, the whole thing was in Hebrew, so most people had no idea what he was saying. But towards the end, the question and answer, a friend of mine raised his hand. He says, excuse me, sir, what right did we have to take this land from the Arabs? I did a double take. It's Katuv B'Torah. Hashem gave this land to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He says, if your only right to the land is because of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, how could you say, Ani lo dati? Well, the place went crazy. He's insulting the general. It's a whole thing like this. And finally, he gave the only answer you can really give. She'ela tova ein tshuva. It's a good question. There's no answer. Rabbi Lau, he says that Ben-Gurion asked to meet with him. He had a question in Tanakh on something because he always studied Tanakh. So after he answered his question, he says, I have a question for you. When you testified before the Peel Commission And they said, what right do you have to take this land from the Arabs? You said, what do you mean? You took out a chumash and you say, this is our, Murakama. This gives us the right to be able to have the land. We had it beforehand. It says so right here. He says, but there are lots of other things in that Torah. He says, you have to keep kosher, you have to keep Shabbos. What about all those things? And he says, Ben Gurion was a very smart man. He didn't say a word. There is an inherent contradiction in Zionism, and there's no way to solve it. It's built into the process. Israel is a Zionist country, which means it is a country for the Jews, that any Jew has a right to come here. The national flag is based on a talus. The national anthem is the hope, Hatikva, the hope of the Jews to be able to return after 2,000 years. The official day of rest is Saturday. There's all kinds of very, very Jewish aspects to it, and it's a Jewish state. On the other hand, it's a democracy. So what happens if at some point the majority of the state of Israel is 51% not Jewish, and they vote out Israel as a Jewish state and make it a democratic state? What happens then? If you say the majority cannot vote, then you're not a democracy. And if you say that they can, then you're not a Zionist. It's not a Jewish state. These are the contradictions. And so when Yom HaAtzmaut comes along, there are people who treat it as a religious holiday. When I say a religious holiday, I mean they really try too hard. I'll give you an example. Hanukkah, we say Hallel. We add in Alanisim. We light candles because of the miracle. Okay. On Yom HaAtzmaut, there are places where they say the Yontif Psuke de Zimra. They read a Haftorah from the Navi. During Hanukkah, we don't read a Haftorah. On Shabbos, but on Hanukkah itself, we don't read a Haftorah. We don't do the Yontif Psuke de Zimra. By law, everything has to be closed down. They've made some exceptions in recent years, but for a long time, you weren't even allowed to open your store. You can get tremendous fines and things. It was over the top. A sense of desperation to be able to create this as a religious holiday. So that's one approach. And then there are the people who look at Yom HaAtzmaut as a sad day. As somebody said to me once, you could look at it as the founding of the state of Israel, or you could look at it as the day that 7 Arab countries declared war on the Jewish people and all came to attack us and kill us. And thousands of people were killed. So that happened as a result from the declaration. So on that day, all that happened is we started a war. There was no miracle on the fact that we read a piece of paper. That's what they want to say. And some people look at it as, okay. Nobody forces you to do anything on the 4th of July in America. It's American Independence Day. If you want to have a barbecue, have a barbecue. You want to fly the flag, fly the flag. You want to watch fireworks, fly fireworks. But there's no imposition. Somehow this has become a bellwether. Dr. David Lukens tells the story that he was meeting once with the head of the Jewish agency about a program in Aish Torah. And he says, well, I don't want to support this program because Aish Torah is not a Zionist organization. And he says, why is that? He says, they don't say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. He says, and tell me, sir, do you say it on Passover? Are you honestly setting a religious standard to determine whether or not someone should get funding only if you observe Judaism, which I don't keep, the way that I decided you should keep it? I'm going to be your rabbinical overseer? You don't believe in freedom of religion? You're going to impose your version of something that you yourself don't even do? The Panovich Rav was, like I said, the Brisker Rav was more towards the negative side. The Panovich Rav was less towards the negative side. And in fact, in Panovich, they didn't say Tachnan on Yom HaAtzmaut. I don't know about today, but Panovich Rav used to do. Someone asked him once, what do you do on Yom HaAtzmaut? He says, I do the same thing as Ben Gurion. I don't say Tachnun and I don't say Hallel. And he would fly the Israeli flag. Somebody said to him once, you put that shmata on top of your yeshiva? He says, when I was in, the yeshiva was in Lithuania, I put the Lithuanian flag on top of my yeshiva. If I could put that piece of shmata on, I could put this piece of shmata on. But a lot of people are just caught in the middle. I don't know what to do. The official Agudah Yisrael position is Israel's a country. It does good things and it does bad things. When it does good things, we should applaud it. When it does bad things, we should criticize it. And that's the approach that many people take. Yom HaAtzmaut. You know, I don't fast and tear kriya, and I don't say Hallel, and we're big day yontif, and as it says in the Rinat Yisrael Siddur, sing Shir Malos to the tune of Hatikva. You know, I don't do those things. I recognize it. That's their position. So, to my mind, the best that we can hope for is tolerance. Let's tolerate each other. People want to say Hallel and treat it as a yontif. That's fine. I was going to yeshiva on Yom HaAtzmaut. I go to yeshiva on Hanukkah. You know, and a neighbor calls out and says, Dovid, where you going? So I'm going to yeshiva. He goes, on Yom HaAtzmaut? I said, what should I do? He said, you have to have a barbecue. I said, we're having one in yeshiva. He goes, oh, okay. I guess that's the avodas hayom. It's a barbecue. I don't know. Why? I will tell you the one thing that I have never gotten an answer to, and I would be so happy if someone could explain this to me. I have not gotten a reasonable answer, and I know sometimes people do reach out to me with answers when I pose these types of questions, but I just can't figure it out. And that is, if you hold that a nace took place on Hayir, if that's your position, and that's why we say Hallel, because of that miracle. So the Rabbanut came out with a position that if Yom HaAtzmaut comes out on Friday or Sunday, they make it they push it back to Thursday. Because they don't want to Chol Shabbos. If you start the celebrations Saturday night, they know people will be preparing on Shabbos. If it's on Friday during the day, it'll go into Shabbos. So they push it back to Thursday. Okay. That means that you're celebrating it on Gimel. How can you say Hallel on Gimel? If you hold a nace took place on Hay, you can't say it on Gimel. So someone said to me, Taka, Merkaz Harav, Yeshiva Merkaz Harav, they say it on Hayir, no matter when it comes out. Even if they push the celebrations to a different day, Hallel is at the end of the day. But for all of those places where they say Hallel on Gimel ER, how in the world do they explain that? So this is a mystery that I don't understand. Okay, so quickly about the other 2 days that are somewhat controversial, and that is Yom HaShoah and Yom Hazikaron. Yom HaShoah is a real problem. When you have one specific day, it of course begs the question why you don't have a specific day for the Spanish Inquisition or for the pogroms in Chalmenki, which wiped out 90% of Eastern Europe, or, all of the other different tragedies that we've suffered? And the answer is we do have a day. It's called Tisha B'Av. So why are you taking a different day for the Holocaust? And why are you putting it in Nisan? Nisan is not allowed to have any public mourning. If someone dies during Nisan, you don't even say a hesped. There are people who are knowing not to go to a cemetery. And you put Yom HaShoah during Nisan, which goes against all of what we know to be Jewish tradition? Number one. Number two, you honor it with a moment of silence. That's something that we Jews don't do. One thing we never do is keep our mouths shut. Yeah. We daven, we say Tehillim, we say Slichos, we say different kind of things. Non-Jews honor it with a moment of silence. Something as unique as the Holocaust, when you're not allowed to have a public commemoration, you do it by using a non-Jewish method to commemorate the most Jewish event that you could possibly imagine, the destruction of world Jewry. That's what you choose to do. That's why there are people who are very unhappy with this, and it goes down to the root, and the root is actually a somewhat dark chapter of Jewish history. And that is the following. Holocaust survivors who came back to Israel hid the fact that they were Holocaust survivors because they were being made fun of by the Israelis. The nickname for Holocaust survivors was sabon, soap. You went like sheep to the slaughter. You let them kill you. Why didn't you rise up? And that's why the day that they chose for Yom HaShoah was the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And the official day is Holocaust Memorial for Heroes and Martyrs. A hero is someone who died with a gun in his hand. And a martyr is somebody who got killed. Oh, well. The Blusheva Rebbe and so many other Jews who kept kosher in the concentration camps under starvation conditions, they're not heroes? No, because they never got in their hands. And the fact that you are trying to cast aspersions on the Jews who went to their death. I spoke to some people who were in this situation. Says, what were you supposed to do? Here you are in your little shtetl. You're on the verge of starvation. So you're strong. So you run away and join the partisans. What happens to your parents and your grandparents? What happens to your children and your grandchildren? What happened to the children and the elderly? 1 million of the people who got killed in the Holocaust were little children. So do you abandon them? Do you leave? Do you fight? Do you save yourself? If a place would rebel and fight, they killed everybody in the city and the city next to them and the city on the other side of them. So are you ready to take on everybody's lives? So, okay, after the fact, you know that everyone's going to die, but you didn't know that at the time. So that's why there are a lot of people who are not happy with it. And I'm old enough to remember during the students' struggle for Soviet Jewry that they said to add a fourth matzah to the Seder, the matzah of hope, as if there are not enough signs of slavery already in the Seder. You have to add an extra matzah. Needless to say, even the people who started doing it stopped it because it was just a silly, unnecessary addition. In 1992, when the Rabin government came to power and the Meretz party was given the education ministry, so this was already in 1992, the Meretz Minister of Education said, Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah, is no longer relevant. We should change it into a day of national suffering for all people. The slavery of the blacks in America, the Armenian genocide, because you can't just have a whole day just focusing on Jews. Yeah, this is the problem. The last one is Yom HaZikaron. The fact that there's a day to honor Israel's fallen, I think that's definitely appropriate. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The objection, once again, is the fact that the way they chose to honor Jews who died al Kiddush Hashem, and let's be clear, a soldier who dies fighting against the enemies, they're not just fighting you because you're an Israeli. They're fighting you because you're a Jew. And the protests that have been breaking out across the world make it clear. It's not about Israel. It's about Jews. So it's a powerful message to be able to watch and to be able to see. And the only way you could think to honor them was with a moment of silence that you took from the non-Jewish culture. You can't say, let's take that opportunity and say Tehillim for a minute. Everyone share a kapitel Tehillim, something where we all join together. This is the problem. It also becomes kind of emotional. So only if you died wearing a uniform. What if you were out of uniform and you got killed? Do you get remembered on Yom HaZikaron? What if you were killed in a terrorist attack? Do you get remembered on Yom HaZikaron? And this becomes a very, once again, emotional issue. But just to understand the position of the people who have difficulty with it, that's the idea. And the least clear of all of these is, of course, Yom Yerushalayim. Because who's not happy that we got back the old city? Do you say Hallel on that? That's the question. It's a halachic question. Do you say Hallel? Do you not say Hallel? There are people who would not even consider saying it on Yom HaAtzmaut, who consider saying it on Yom Yerushalayim. The Mir Yeshiva famously, of course, says Hallel, but that's because a bomb dropped directly on the yeshiva and didn't explode, and they were miraculously saved. They had a nace that took place for them. But what's the approach? And again, the difficulty is that it became politicized. It became a political day. And like all things in Israel, it's complicated. Everything's complicated here. Everything is very emotional because life here is life and death. You know? These protesters who were protesting demanded that they get brought vegan food and bottled water, and that's human rights violation. Yeah, we have a different idea of human rights violation: people killing us, attacking us. So, Mitzvah Hashem, there'll come a time when we'll all get along. Mashiach will come. That, of course, will solve all the problems. But in the meantime, hopefully the people who say Hallel can respect the people who don't, and the people who don't say Hallel will respect the people who do. And there won't be fighting. Everybody's following what they're doing, handling things in the way that their rabbis have advised them to. And like I say, fights don't usually break out over gebrachs. And as far as I'm concerned, that's much more of an important issue in Judaism, because if you go into Pesach and you can't have a matzah b'ray or knedlach, then you have to question whether or not it's even worthwhile to be a Jew. So, but certainly I wouldn't say saying Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut is more important than saying Kriya Shema twice a day. And I was once davening in a Dati Leumi shul, and I'll never forget, when it came to the tefillah for the Medina, everyone turned to look at me to see if I was saying it. I said, Rabbi Say, Halavai, you watched me like this when I said Kriya Shema. Then I wouldn't mind so much. Because if you're worried that I'm not observing my Judaism correctly and you want to make sure that I'm a better Jew, I can appreciate that. But just to try to impose religious sanctions on people, lo yafeh. That shouldn't be what the Jewish people are all about. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can post a question. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. You can look at past recordings, leave a comment, send an email, sponsor an episode, sponsor a question and answer, and be part of the Rabbi Orlofsky community. That's it for this week. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.